My name is Karen Brady. I'm an educational consultant at the Central Region, and I'm joined today by my co-facilitators, Lisa Bola and Sherry Hartman. And I'm so excited today to be the one to introduce you to our esteemed presenter, Dr. Lena Edwards-Santora. Dr. Santora is a research professor with the Wheelock College of Education and Human Development at Boston University. She currently serves as co-principal investigator of the National Lead for Literacy Center and lead of the Instruction and Intervention strand for the National Center on Improving Literacy. With both centers, she works on projects related to professional learning, technical assistance, and instructional intervention for students with literacy-related disabilities. Dr. Santoro is also serving as co-PI on a project focused on the development and pilot testing of a Tier 3 literacy intervention, and has served as co-PI on a series of IES research studies focused on classroom discourse, vocabulary, and comprehension of students at risk of reading and writing failure. She has also taught pre- and in-service teachers and leaders at the undergraduate and graduate level, presented extensively on how to apply evidence-based instructional strategies in the classroom, and consulted with state, local, and private agencies, including her recent work with the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network patent to develop content related to MTSS implementation in the areas of writing and intensive intervention for students with dyslexia and language-based challenges in reading. This session is recorded and closed captioning is available. So please join me in welcoming, please, Dr. Lena Edwards-Santora.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, everybody. Good morning. I am excited to have you join me this morning for a session focused on macro level writing, specifically through the lens of strategy instruction. So I'll just get going with the content and tell you a little bit more about what we have planned this morning. First, I want to share some acknowledgements. The work that I am discussing today has come out of Pennsylvania and Patton's work to support writing within the context of multi-tiered systems of support. So several years ago, Patton convened a committee of experts, including Patton consultants, as well as national experts, to look at how to structure a system, a multi-tiered system of support to focus on writing instruction. And so the work discussed today was generated within that context. So I just want to acknowledge that committee and those individuals who serve to create the vision for what we're discussing today. I've shared lots of materials with you, and I want to make sure you have access to those. So my Patton colleagues will be putting a link to materials in the chat so you can find these resources. Overall, let me just run down the list so you know what you can access and what you have available as support for this session. The first thing is your PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint is what I'm sharing today. And if you would like a copy, it just allows you to follow along with the content, provides a nice outline for what we're doing today. So you have access to that PowerPoint. If you note on the right-hand side of the table, the file name is here listed so you can match up materials to file names as you look in the drive to find these resources. Another valuable resource is the writing scope and sequence that was developed with the writing committee that I just referenced. This scope and sequence is K-12. It provides the details for you about what to teach and what to emphasize during instruction on writing. And so I find that extremely valuable and foundational, and I will reference that early on this morning. The third is a set of, is a rubric, an analytic rubric that I'm recommending that you, for your use, to monitor student writing performance. It's called the Smarter Balanced rubric. I'll discuss that in more detail as we get going, but that is something I definitely want you to have access to know about, and if you can, to start using, if you're not using an analytic rubric already. And then I have a couple packets of information that align with the strategies that we'll be talking about today. The first packet emphasizes the first strategy, foundational paragraph writing, and the second packet looks at writing quality features, focus content, organization, and style. And so these two packets will allow you to access instructional intervention ideas as well as materials that you can take to your classroom, or you can quickly take and modify to suit the needs of your students. So those are real practical packets to know about. And then finally, this session is attached to a part 2 coming up in March. And optimally, I want to discuss this content in a way that you can implement it. And so coming back to part 2, essentially your ticket in the door, if you will be to share any kind of implementation that you've had a chance to do within the next month. And so there's a team presentation template to help you structure that share back time. So note that that template is also in your materials folder. So hoping you can find your way, navigate to these materials and get oriented and organized. We'll participate with each other today, mostly via the chat box. So you're welcome as we go to enter any kind of observations, questions. If you do have questions, I will pause and check in with my patent colleagues at various time points and ask them to relay anything that's come up in the chat. So please, leverage that for discussion. There are a few slides where I have set them up for you to annotate. For those of you who are sort of immersed now and familiar with Zoom, annotate allows you to actually mark up on the slide that I'm showing. So to find that annotate control, I usually typically roll my cursor around the top of the screen. A bar will pop up with the annotate. I select annotate, and then I get a drop-down menu of some features. Most often I'll have you annotate by just writing text on a slide or by stamping. So note that I want you to focus on text or stamping. And then you're able to mark up the slides as directed. Now, don't worry if you're not familiar with annotate or you're working through a device that doesn't allow you to do that. You can certainly respond via the chat box, and we will check in and I will talk with my patent colleagues about the responses you're adding to the chat that go along with any annotate prompts. So we'll work it both ways, but for those who can annotate, I'd love you to do so when prompted. The other thing to note is we will have some breakout room discussion time today, at least at 2 time points. I love you to get in these breakout rooms. We'll arrange them by district team. We'll also have rooms for those of you who've just come in on your own and wanted to hear this content. We'll set up a room for you to talk with others across the state about implementation and practice. So the breakout rooms allow you just to have some open processing time about the content and think it through with colleagues. Putting this session within the context of the series we've been doing with patent, our session, macro level writing instruction, will focus on exactly that, talking about strategies to support the writing process at the secondary level. That's today's content, with a virtual session part 2 follow-up on March 28th. Note there that it says team presentations on implementation. So I really would love to encourage you to bring back any implementation that you've worked on that has applicability to the session content today and share it with us. We've had some wonderful team presentations through the other sessions that we've explored. Micro level writing in the fall, and then core reading strategy instruction was one we did late fall at the start, and the team presentations at the start of the new year. So we're running this session similarly. I'll share content today, hoping you can take it out the door, implement some things, and then come back and talk about that implementation in March. So what is that content that we're going to discuss? We're going to set the context within secondary MTSS, and I want you to be aware of some foundational documents that support the research and evidence-based practices that I'm discussing today. Once we set that context, I want to get into how you can link assessment with instruction. And so we'll talk about that smarter balanced rubric a bit more that I told you was in your materials folder. Then we'll look at the strategies, so the core of what the session is about. We'll spend the bulk of our time on foundational paragraph writing. So there's a foundational paragraph writing strategy I want to show you. I want to walk it through step by step and show you how to support students who might struggle with aspects of this writing process. We'll touch on instructional strategies that help more in a targeted way, focus on focus, or focus on the organization of writing, or focus on content, or focus on style. These are the quality features of writing. And there are strategies that you can use in your instruction to just target these aspects of writing quality and very specific, in very specific ways. So while we'll spend bulk of our time on part one, I hope to just summarize, just so you get a sense of how you could look at each of these quality areas of writing in a more specified way. And then finally, we'll conclude with implementation, and that's where I'll walk you through the presentation template, hoping that you might come back and share information from your implementation. Overall, pacing wise, I expect that we'll take a 15-minute break somewhere between 10 and 10:30 this morning. Most likely that will occur in number 3, somewhere in part 1 of the foundational paragraph writing strategy. And what I'll do is look for a natural break in the content, and we'll pause and we'll stop and walk away and stretch and have a pacing break at somewhere between 10 and 10:30. I'll watch for that natural break in content. So that's our game plan. That's what we're going to look at today. Just to frame learning outcomes, what I want you to walk out the door with today, the ability to assess and monitor student progress in writing, so identifying how to do that. I want you to be able to score student writing samples with that analytic rubric. I'm going to add something to the table called measurable components, and I want you to understand how that works. Next is identify an instructional strategy to support macro level writing, particularly as it links to quality written expression. And then finally, take this to implementation. Really, my goal is to help you be queued up to take this out the door today and implement some instruction focused on macro level writing skills. So to begin, a little bit of setting the context, and then I'll move right into assessment. So just to situate us in context, we're talking about a secondary system of multi-tiered systems of support. So today's strategy is intended to support all students, but all students who are struggling with written expression and need some additional support. So we want to really be able to think that this is a strategy you could use with all students in the classroom, but you could also apply it in a way where it enhances instruction for the students who struggle. One of the things you might think when I present this information is, oh, we might do some of these things. That relates, that connects, this resonates with what I'm already doing. And I love that that might be the case. Then from a secondary system, if you see that there are some aspects of what I'm presenting in place already, your second question about implementation in a secondary system is it being implemented with fidelity? Are we doing all the things that make and align with effective practice? What can we do to align our system so it's just not one classroom or 2 classrooms or 3 doing these things, but all of our classrooms doing these things? So think about what we're discussing today from a content perspective at different layers. Right? One is understand and know the instruction that you can take away. But the second is to ask about that fidelity piece. That fidelity of implementation matters from a systems perspective, which is why I'm so happy that there's several district teams, school and district teams here today. Your documents, where does the work I'm discussing come from? So, this is not a presentation where I'm coming in and saying these are Lena Santoro's favorite practices to teach at the secondary level for macro level writing. I do like them and they are wonderful, but they are effective because they are generated and aligned with research and evidence-based practice. And I want you to know as a source document where we get the information to share these strategies. From a writing perspective on the left-hand side, I'm drawing from the Writing Next report that was sponsored by the Carnegie Corporation. And that report was led by I would say, the leading researcher in written expression. And that leading researcher essentially did a very systematic review of the literature and distilled out what is effective based on the studies that were high quality. And that Writing Next report guides that focus. On the right-hand side, the Institute of Education Sciences practice guides, the one that aligns most with the session today is number 2, teaching secondary students to write effectively. That report, it's very similar in the sense that we are looking at what the research says. What are the studies that have explored what works for students when it comes to writing? What instruction benefits students in the classroom the most? And so that is another document to really look at. I actually love it. There's a lot of practical ideas for how to implement effective writing instruction at the secondary level. So these 2 reports are foundational in our field. I know you'll see 2007 and think, oh, that was a little while ago. 2016, yeah, more recent, but not quite, it's still not current. I have to tell you, just the reality of research is slow moving. And so a lot of what is in these reports stands up today definitively. And in fact, some of the emerging research that we've seen since 2016 is more supportive than ever of what is in these reports. So these are a great place to start to get grounded in what we're discussing. The other document I think very interesting and aligns with this work is something that has been produced by the Cedar Center. Gary Troia is the lead author of this evidence-based practices for writing instruction guide. It is your soup to nuts guide of the essential components of what makes evidence-based writing practice work. And as you can see by the table of contents on the screen, you can dive deeply into each component and understand what that looks like in practice. This would make a wonderful sort of PLC guide, as would the others that I mentioned earlier. So just another great resource to know about. Gary Troia, also one of the leading experts in our field related to written expression for students. So a little bit of where this all comes from. The next thing I want to tell you about is why we're talking about macro level writing today. So we're looking on the right-hand side, the right box on your screen here. Macro level structure is aligned with the writing process for students. So we look at how sentences are combined, how sentences can be written in more complex ways, how students use vocabulary. But we also look at how students generate written text, and that's the writing process. And you're all familiar with that, right? It's how students plan, how they write, how they transcribe, how they edit, revise, they can provide feedback to each other and collaborate. That is the essence of the macro structure, the larger structure in writing. On the left-hand side are micro skills, just so you know the difference. Micro skills are the foundational skills in writing. And we think of foundational skills in writing just as we think about foundational skills in reading. So for writing, this means the handwriting, the production of text, keyboarding, the production of text. We include spelling, we include basic sentence structure, so learning syntax. And mechanics meaning I'm learning punctuation, right? And how to capitalize and end sentences with an end mark. So you notice here that sentences kind of connect everything. We're talking about sentences within the context of macro structure for sure. We're talking about sentence structure and foundational skills, but sentences really bridge both micro and macro structure. So today with macro structure, we are looking at the writing process and the quality of student written expression. So we are far on the right there with that box. A wonderful way to illustrate this is through Joan Sedita's writing rope. I like this as well. It's just a visual of how the micro skills that involves transcription, right? The production of text. That's your left-hand side of the box I just showed you, are the bottom threads of the rope, and the threads on top are your macro structure. They deal with the composition. And you can see how the two things twine together. And just as I spoke to how sentences bridge, your grammar piece connects them. Your grammar piece, your sentence structure helps connect and twine the rope together from the macro and the macro and micro, excuse me. So just a great visual here of how all that comes together. So question to pause, just to have you think a little bit, because I want you to know why we are looking at macro today. That's our focus. Which of the following represents the macro level processes of writing? Which is it? A, handwriting, B, spelling, C, mechanics, or D, the writing process? And you can just think in your head, that's fine. If you want to be daring, I'd let you put it in the chat. Put it in the chat. Put your response here in the chat. Thanks, Jody. Thank you. You all got it. Good, Leah. Thank you. Harbor Creek, I saw, was a good response. Everybody, yes. Your macro response, your macro level writing is your response D, the writing process. So let's move forward here and take a glance at that scope and sequence that I shared with you. So I'm going to pull, just a minute, I'm going to pull up the file so you can see what this looks like. But there's one thing today, one thing I wanted to narrow in on. So I'm going to stop this share. I'm going to go over here to my, my scope and sequence and bring that up for you to see. And we'll take a look at that. So let me see. This is not going to be it here, but it is here. Hopefully, Pan colleagues, stop me if you are not currently seeing the scope and sequence on my screen. So I've opened the scope and sequence. And if you look on the far left, you see that we are looking at the micro level component of the scope and sequence. Do you see that box in red on the far left? That is telling me that I am looking at the micro level skills on the scope and sequence right now. I will introduce the key to you. Do you see on the far left in that red box? A B equals a beginning skill when we first introduce it. A D equals a developing skill when we want to continue to reinforce it and build it in its complexity. And then finally, S is secure, meaning we hope that it's mastered by that point in time. So if you look over then at the top right-hand side, you'll see K through 12 listed. And then below that, you'll see the B's and the D and the S for secure. Notice again that we're looking at micro skills. Conventions start here, capitalization and punctuation. I'm going to just scroll slowly. You can see we're looking at the micro skills. Parts of speech, also micro skills, but that's also included here. How parts of speech are used in written expression in sentences. This is something definitely to come back to and take a look at in more detail. This is where I wanted to land today. So now we're looking at the macro level skills. And you can see that the key is still the same. B equals beginning. We're beginning to introduce that skill. D is developing. Developing is reinforcing or building in complexity, right? We're adding more to that. We're growing that skill. And S is secure, that it's mastered. And you'll see in orange, quality of writing is the header of the macro skills that we're looking at right here. You'll see the K through 12, right? In orange on the far right, and the B, D, and S as beginning, developing, and secured skills. And then what I want you to look at are quality of writing. Focus, content, organization, style. These are the central components of what makes writing good writing, what makes writing quality writing. So I really want you to see that we can address focus, content, organization, style to help students do the things that are listed in yellow under each of these quality components of writing. As we move forward, I do want you to know that sentences are part of this. Sometimes we evaluate conventions as part of quality of writing. So listen to me say that again. We do evaluate conventions, and we sometimes have that as a domain when we think about quality of writing. But what I want to do today, since we're talking about the macro skills, I want to set conventions aside. I want to just think today about these 4 ingredients: focus, content, organization, and style. That is our emphasis today. So start kind of thinking about those things, those quality things: focus, content, organization, and style. And as I switch back to my PowerPoint, think about how your students do with those quality elements of writing. How are your students doing? So think about that. Are they having trouble in one domain or with one component more than others? What are the trends you're seeing? As I switch back to my PowerPoint, do think about that, because I do want you to respond to that just momentarily. So we're going to look at the top 4, as I mentioned: the quality features of writing, focus, organization, content, and style. So get these in your head: focus, organization, content, and style. I'm sure you know what they mean and what they mean to writing, but I'm just going to do a very, very quick rundown of focus, organization, content, and style. So with focus, what we're talking about in written expression is that when I read a student's composition or an essay or a paragraph, I see a single controlling point made through the essay. There's no diversions that take me off task. We're really controlled in focus. We're controlled in that single point. We have a strong sense that we're reading about singularly a topic that relates to itself, right? No diversions, no off topic, no tangents, everything hangs together. In terms of organization, when we think about that quality feature in writing, we're looking at that organizational structure of a composition. So we're making sure that there's a chronological order. So it has a beginning, middle, and end. Beginning, middle, and end is very clear. Topic, sentence, supporting sentences, concluding sentence. Beginning, middle, and end. There's some kind of order that's logical. So when we think of organization, we think of how it hangs together based on that text structure. Order and sequence is key here. And you know what? Transitions are used optimally to help structure that organization. So if students don't transition well, if they don't kind of help guide the reader of that essay into this is first, this is next, this is kind of my final point, or in conclusion, or this is next, any of those signal words or phrases help build an awareness of an organizational structure in writing. So to have strong organization, you have these strong features that help order and sequence a written expression and essay. So 2 more, right? We talked about focus and organization. Let's just touch on content and style. And as I do, think about your students. Where do they struggle most of these 4 quality elements? They're one that really is sticky for them. Think about that a little bit. Okay, content. Content is the presence of ideas, right? It is the substance. It is the essence. Content connects to the knowledge students are expressing through their writing, right? These are that I've got developed facts, I'm putting in examples, I have anecdotes that connect and relate to what I'm talking about. It could be the details. Depending on what you're writing, what genre of writing, you might express an opinion and a reason for that opinion. But that is essentially the knowledge, the presence of ideas. It is the substance of what an essay or written composition is. So presence of ideas and substance, gotta have that content. And then finally, style. I often think of style as sort of the icing on the cake, if you will, of written expression. It is, I'm going to look below because this is how I just think of it and it rings in my head. Style is personality on paper. I hear that writer's voice as I read their essay. And how do I get to that voice? How do I establish good voice? Well, it's the two bullets above. It is that I have good word choice. I have enough vocabulary to make it varied and interesting. I also don't use the same simple sentence structure for all again and again and again, that I actually have enough knowledge and depth to vary my sentence structure, to make it interesting, to use both simple and complex sentences, to have variety. So that's gist of style. So we've just in the sum up, I told you a couple things. One is how important quality writing is to macro level writing, right? That it is something we have to pay attention to. These are the universal quality features of writing. They're not just identified because they align with your Pennsylvania state assessment. No, they are the universal ways that we think about and evaluate quality written expression. And we are looking through the lens of how students are doing with focus, organization, content, and style for that reason. This sets up our purpose for macro level writing instruction. We want to get at these features. We want to get at these components. So just for a minute, I'm going to have you reflect, and then I'm going to direct you to provide a response here through annotation. And if you can't annotate, no worries at all. Just put your response in the chat. So here's what I want you to think about, and then respond when I prompt you. What quality features of writing are difficult for your students? And I want you to pick one. Just pick your first one, the main one. If you note here on the far left, I said all features. So you can absolutely select all features. Why would you select that? You don't know what's going on in the student writing. It's all over the place. Students are struggling. You can put a check in that box for sure, all features. Yes, some of you started and you're welcome to do so. You can poll for focus, organization, content, and style as well. And as I said, if you can't get your annotate to work, please respond in the chat box. I'll double check with Pat and colleagues what we're seeing as trends. So go ahead, fill up this table related to where are you seeing things, where are you seeing the most difficulty for students? Now I'm going to just stop talking for a little bit, let you work on your responses and figuring out the annotate. Yeah, again, to annotate, you can kind of hover, move your cursor around the top of the screen. Hopefully you'll see the menu pop down, select annotate, and then stamp, or I see some of you are hand drawing in check marks or marking responses, which is absolutely fine too.
And a few people in the chat, Lena, had said focus, just even what the prompt is asking. There were 2 contents and 2 styles.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Great, everybody. Thanks for entering in the chat as well. I'll continue to give you a little more time here to respond. One of the things I'm happy to see is that you're able to isolate and identify where students are having some difficulty versus just all over, all features. In organization, I think, is our runaway winner in terms of trending here with at least this group. I think content is a strong second. And then a little with style, which is wonderful. So for those of you who are selecting style, that is a great, in some ways, great place to be for students. Yeah, and it's someone added style on the top left. Thanks, Leah. Yeah, for style. Fabulous, everybody. I'll let you have just a few seconds to enter your final responses. And then I'm going to clear the screen here. I want you to carry your response today, what you selected as top choice, into the presentation. And I want you to look for areas where I've marked up my slides to indicate if I'm talking about focus, organization, content, and style. I want you to kind of carry that in as the need, the primary need for your students today, and connect the content that way.
And Lena, just for the record, there was a significant uptick in style after I unmiked.
Okay, so style maybe equal to content potentially. So I mean, my gist is, without doing counts, I think organization is our top, and then content and style are sort of paired next, which is, it's interesting. That's great. Okay, perfect. Well, I am going to clear the animations right now. So I'm going to ask you not to enter any more responses, and I will move forward here with the presentation. Thank you for your reflection. So hold on to your responses as we move forward. Now I'll make connections, especially knowing that you are thinking about organization, content, and style, though I don't want to ignore the couple of people here who thought focus was a challenge for students either.